Our theme this month is the creativity of life. And today's topic is living in choice. Have you ever found yourself in a situation or a mindset when you said to yourself or maybe to somebody else, well, I just had no choice, or I had no other choice? I'd like to think that none of us in this room or in this teaching, the science of mind, uses either one of those phrases anymore, or even allows them to creep into our thinking. Because as Wayne Moore sings in his song, the answer is always yes. He uses the phrase, we always have a choice. Try to avoid thinking that that's just verbal manipulation. Because as Dr. Raymond Charles Barker says in his book, The Power of Decision, the power to make right decisions is ours. A healthy mind ceases to make erroneous decisions. Isn't that interesting? A healthy mind ceases to make erroneous decisions. Modern science, he goes on to say, has proven that the universe, the cosmos, if you will, is an arena of intelligence, wherein intelligence, left to its own devices, acts and reacts intelligently. Duh, of course. Science finds cause in creation by seeking the creative process as it functions in a framework of intelligence known as order and premised upon the law, meaning universal law. This creative process, individualized in the spiritual being having a human experience, and that would be you and that would be me, that is our capacity for decisions that are right for us. So let's explore that phrase, right decisions. Someone, somewhere long ago, coined the phrase, even when you make no decision about something, that's a decision. I used to think that was crass and obtuse, to be honest with you, until I began learning the philosophy of the science of mind and realized the truth of that statement. What a gift. I can choose not to do something, just like I can choose to do something. Now, if that wasn't true, then I was still captive to outside influences, both known and unknown. So as I began to understand the power and the freedom of my right to choose in every decision, I became increasingly guided about or toward partnering with that universal intelligence that Dr. Barker spoke of. The creative process, individualized in me, in you, is what provides us with the capacity for right decisions. Of course, I must use it. You must use it. We must nurture it, trust it, and then begin using it so that it becomes action for our highest and best good. It becomes the act of connectivity with Spirit, connecting with Spirit. Your action and mine to participate in the abundance of creativity that created the unlimited abundance here on planet Earth and throughout the universe. On page 25 of the Science of Mind text, which incidentally is the first page of the text, Holmes sets the stage for what is to come in the following 650 pages. So it's really important to read the first few pages because they set the atmosphere for the balance of what comes. And if you are reading the text and you have some challenges with understanding it, go back to the first chapter. Remember what the first chapter is called? Nothing itself. And it gives us a balancing, a centering of what this philosophy is all about. So Holmes begins by saying that to suppose the creative intelligence of the universe would create humans in bondage and leave them bound would be to dishonor that very creative power that we call God. Individuality must be spontaneous. It can never be automatic, which means we must allow our thoughts, our ideas, our actions to be the result of our own connection with universal intelligence, rather than a mirror image of someone else's. And here's a very important point to remember. The divine plan is one of freedom. Bondage is not God ordained. Freedom is the birthright of every human being. Thus, our inherent nature is forever seeking to express itself in terms of freedom. This doesn't require any special, unusual degree of intelligence, but rather the practical application of what we now know, in order that we may increase our knowledge, which is another way of saying, start right where you are. You are perfect, whole, and complete, just as you are in this moment. That doesn't mean that can't change, expand, and grow. But every moment, we are perfect, whole, and complete in spirit in that moment. We often hear the phrase used that we are living in a sea of potentiality. And what I know is that if we never learn to swim, we are captive to the direction that the water pushes us. And not unlike the collective consciousness that surrounds us and controls us until we decide to swim in the direction that we choose for ourselves. To me, that's a metaphor that's easily understood, especially here in the islands of Aloha. When we have learned to swim, the beauty of our beaches, our bays, our coastlines expands. And it expands to our experiences of snorkeling, for example, stand-up paddling perhaps, canoeing, maybe scuba diving, laying net, and wind sailing or surfing. There are scores of water sports that once you know how to swim, you can go ahead and do and feel comfortable and confident in doing them. Learning to swim enables us to learn and know what to be conscious of in the ocean and its many bays and shorelines, and including the native inhabitants in the ocean. So just as we create for ourselves a greater space by learning to move skillfully through the water, so too do we accomplish that by learning to skillfully direct our own potentiality in this thing called life. And that includes what is swimming around in that collective consciousness, which may not be for our highest and greatest and best good. Both Ernest Holmes and Raymond Charles Barker are certainly in agreement on that. They would describe that as being set free by expanding your truth. And in doing so, we create a greater space for ourselves, a greater freedom at no expense to anyone else. Here in the islands, we are also aware of and often participate in what the native culture calls talk story. So today I want to share somebody's talk story with you that it was very meaningful to that person. And I'll share the author's name after you've heard the story. I'll tell that story, though, in the first person, as the storyteller told it as it was written. So you get a deeper sense of impact on that individual. So here's the story. Some years ago, I spent time at a spiritual retreat at the Asilomar Conference Grounds in Pacific Grove, California. It's without question one of the most breathtaking spots that I've ever visited. For 27 years, I had spent many weeks there, communing with my peers and with nature. Asilomar is one of those places that seems to have a sense of sacredness to it. With the ocean, the wildlife, and the amazing trees, it's not too difficult to feel the presence of God emanating from it all. Even the people on retreat seem to emit God essence. Lost my place there. Hang on a minute. Just prior to leaving, as I stood on the back deck of the very room in which I had stayed many times, I found myself looking around at the beauty that surrounded me. I found myself saying, this place is timeless. It's as beautiful and sacred as it was the first time I set foot on it in 1977. Nothing has changed. And at that moment, a voice, which over the years has become known to me as divine love, spoke gently to me, and it said, "Oh yes, something has changed. You have changed. You, my beloved, have changed." With that simple revelation, the writer said, I began to weep. It was true. The Asilomar grounds were as sacred as they always had been. But I had changed. I too had become sacred in my own eyes. Not that I could ever be more or less sacred in God's eyes. The truth is, life is a sacred experience. And it's true for all of us. It always has been, always shall be. We cannot become more spiritual than we are in this holy instant. We are already 100% spirit. So it's all about awakening to this truth. That's what makes you and me sacred. That's what the practice of spirituality does. It awakens us to who we have always been. We don't have to go to a retreat center to know this. But granted, it's easier to learn about and remember our spiritual connectedness to God, with God, while we're in an Asilomar setting. And the opportunity to practice that spirituality comes when we go home. From that camp consciousness, the writer said, I saw Asilomar as a sacred place. And I went there in search of a spiritual experience. And I came home realizing I brought that with me. By remembering there is as much God wherever I am as I experienced in the beauty of the Asilomar setting. Well, that was one person's experience of reaping enormous benefits from choosing what for him was profoundly nurturing on his spiritual path and connectedness. I say one person. This is the one person I know who wrote a book about it. But this was his heartfelt story. And I could probably use the name of a number of people that I know who would agree in the awakenings that they have experienced during and after their time at Asilomar. With United Church of Religious Science, with Religious Science International, and with the current merged organization of Centers for Spiritual Living, we met there every year for 57 years. And now, this year, we return. Well, that opens new choices for those who have joined our philosophy since the last time we gathered at Asilomar. Now they too have the choice to immerse themselves in what I call the spirit of place. They may also choose to read more words of wisdom from the author of the story that I just shared with you, because it's from his book, The Art of Being. And as you know, that author, of course, is Reverend Dr. Dennis Merritt Jones. And it's his personal story of the Asilomar experience. So Dennis's story of his experiences in the setting we lovingly call Asilomar closely parallels my own. I was there for the first time in 1994 as a first-year student in this teaching. And the enormity of the impact of being surrounded by hundreds and hundreds of loving, caring, practicing, current-day metaphysicians affected me to the core of my being. For me, it was a no turning back now revelation. And the result of that is, here I am, standing here before you this morning, still speaking, still teaching, still practicing, and learning the science of mind. And coming up on 20 years now in ministry. And I'm still thanking people like Dennis Merritt Jones, like Raymond Charles Barker, The Power of Decision, Candace Beckett, David Walker, Jane Ryder, and so many others whose deep understanding and ability to express what living this philosophy means guided me to developing my own foundation to live and share this way of life. So whether you ever choose Dennis Merritt Jones' path or my path, for your own sake and for your own well-being, choose and honor your own journey to and along your path to being all that you can be. Take time to honor and trust. Trust your creative power. Honor your creative freedom. They're the integral parts of your divine splendor. Integral parts of your journey of awakening. Integral parts of the choices that you make second by second in your life on your journey of awakening. And your journey of connecting with and as the beautiful and the sacred. Find your place of truth and bask in its gift, which is just for you. And so it is.